All right, welcome to the Breathing Edge podcast.
And this is the first in our Energized Leader series.
Yes, and we have asked here's the interesting thing. This woman in particular, I thought she was like doing some pretty cool stuff until she sent her bio. And I was like, okay, she's doing some very cool stuff. Like not just in Australia, but globally.
She is the Energizer Bunny, that's for sure.
Yes. And it's only fitting that she is our first interviewee in the Energized Leader series. So let me introduce you to Kat Dunn. She is the CEO of Green Australia and is a humanitarian capitalist. Now, Green Australia is a social business inspired by the work of Nobel Peace Prize winner and founder of Grameen Bank and grandfather of microfinance, Professor Muhammad Yunus. It advances a new form of capitalism that values altruism and generosity just as much as financial gain. So Kat started her career as a banking and finance lawyer at top-tier law firm Clayton Utz and a corporate M&A lawyer at national firm Spark Helmore Lawyers.
There's a mouthful.
I got it right. So from 2013, she was appointed to lead the regulated fund establishment team for listed company Perpetual Corporate Trust. And in 18 months, led over 40 deals with total funds under management in excess of $3 billion.
That's a lot of zeros.
How's that? So in 2016, Kat was appointed the youngest executive to serve on the senior leadership team of Perpetual Limited. Oh, love it. Charged with building a group-wide cultural improvement program. So she served on Perpetual's Diversity Council and was awarded a CEO Mobius Award for outstanding client leadership. Talk about energized leader. Yeah. So among other industry roles, she's advised the Financial Services Council and Commonwealth Treasury on designing the regulatory framework of the APEC Asia Region Funds Passport and Australian Collective Investment Vehicle Regime.
If you want to know what that is, you might have to look it up. That's what you did.
Yeah. Look, just some really cool stuff. I mean, if you're already in the finance space, you totally get this. So most recently, she served as a chief operating officer of tech media company IdeaPod and is a board member of food innovative catalyst Food Frontier, which promotes protein-rich foods that are healthier for people and the planet. So what's really cool is Kat at the moment is the creator of FOF. So Fear of Failure Forum. Say that like 10 times fast. A movement to say F off to your fear of failure and grow your potential. And coaches CEOs and high achievers on connecting profit with purpose. Oh, that just gives me chills. Profit with purpose.
Okay, continue on.
So Kat has, now how cool is this? Okay, so Kat has her private pilot's license and is passionate about running long distances, stand-up comedy, and empowering humans, rich or poor, to grow their potential. So we're just going to go straight into this interview with Kat because we talk about some very cool things on this podcast. But what I'd like you to listen for is what are those things that you're starting to see emerging in the new up-and-coming leaders? What are some of those characteristics that are important in an energized leader from the next generation?
And it was really fun, and we really enjoyed having Kat on the podcast.
Absolutely. Enjoy. So, Kat, I just want you to just give me like a quick synopsis of your experience of your background and how it served you moving forward.
Before we do that, podcast number 1 of the Energized Leader, and you got the title, Kat.
I'm super. I've positioned my scheduling so that this would happen. Unbeknownst, my master plan is manifested.
Yes, no accidents here.
Awesome.
Great. So good. Look, tell us a little bit about your journey from where you've come from and how that's shaped where you're going today.
If you'd asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have said that I am at the pinnacle of my corporate success. I've ticked all of the boxes that I thought were important to tick. I was very senior in a corporate role. I just gotten married to the love of my life, who was an investment banker, and I had it all. But what I wouldn't have told you at the time was that I was very unhappy and in many ways lying to myself, because all of the boxes that I ticked, the sweet job with great money and status, the correct husband, the right career path weren't actually giving me any of the happiness I thought would come with those signals of success. I grew up in country Western Australia, but was born in the Philippines. And so my parents didn't have much money, and they were obsessed about getting an education and living this emancipated financial life. And I thought that was the most important thing. And I went to school, studied hard, and was just chasing this supposed dream of financial emancipation. And when I got into law school, I originally thought I wanted to be a human rights lawyer, but then got sucked into the groupthink of corporate and commercial law because that's where the money was and that's what all my friends were doing. And me being an impressionable 20-something just thought that that was the noble cause that I too would pursue. And I then learned this, I learned this lesson at the time that you could either choose to be a greedy capitalist with all of the money or a starving humanitarian who saved the world, but you both. And I would have never admitted it to anybody, but I actually didn't resonate with me, that silo. And I always wanted to find a way to marry the two, a way to be able to live a life of meaningful contribution whilst also making a living. But I couldn't see any pathways to that. So, you know, I was a lawyer, I was in funds management, I did the whole senior leader thing in, you know, thinking that that would be my emancipation, but it was the opposite. It made me feel powerless, it made me feel helpless, and it made me feel really bad about myself that I wasn't able to live out my values. And I even started thinking it was a folly to try and live a life of values because that wasn't, that just wasn't the dominant thinking. And feeling this level of dissonance when I was 33 years old was quite hard because I thought I needed to have my life in order, and so I shouldn't be feeling these sentiments of discontent. I should be feeling like I'm on the path, but I wasn't. And I quit my job at the end of 2016 without one to go to, and a number of things happened in quick succession that transformed like the shape of my life to a place where it's almost unrecognizable. Firstly, quit my job. My father, who is born on the same day as me, 56 years older, passed away. I ended up working at a tech company and launching something called F Off, the Fear of Failure Forum, a movement to say F off to your fear of failure and grow your potential, mostly to hack my own way out of my fear of failure and loneliness for doing what I was doing. And then I got headhunted by an organisation called Grameen Australia, which I later found out was the conduit for this idea of social business into Australia. And then in 2018, as my career finally shifted into a place that was much more authentic to who I was, I realized I was lying to myself about my relationship status, and my husband and I divorced. So in like the period of 18 months, I went from being senior corporate leader, like on the path to getting married and building a home and like living the corporate dream, saving for my retirement and dying, to like humanitarian capitalist who lives in a totally different place. He's now single and starting for the very first time to explore what it means to belong genuinely, rather than just gaining the approval of others to satisfy a set of social expectations. And that was, that was a scary time, and I'm still navigating that time right now.
Wow, I just want to kind of get present to the impact of what you just said, because you coming from thinking that you're following your dreams to realizing that you're absolutely not following your dreams, to doing a complete 180 and having life turn around in more than one different way, and navigating the ups and downs of that hero's journey. I mean, it's roughly, would we say, about 3 years in that process for now. So what have you done for yourself to navigate through those turbulent waters, and what has kept you on that path?
I wish I had like a really neat 3 bullet point answer. That would be super easy.
No one does.
What's your go-to? Like, yeah.
Well, I feel like I used to pride myself on having like lots of direction and focus, and I knew exactly what I was doing and when, and that's how I got to where I was. But I feel like the last 3 years have been an experiment on what actually works. And the guiding light that I've used to help me to find my own instincts around what works is getting in touch with my feelings, which was a really hard thing to such an analytical person. I used to discount my feelings and consider them to be a distraction. And I didn't realize that if I could round out my toolkit of being able to use my pros and cons analytical mind with my guidance system, which was my feelings, then I could make decisions that were more appropriate for the nature of the decisions and also decisions that were more consistent with my nature. And so deploying that, I think, has helped me to make choices that have given me inspiration and have made me feel like I'm in the right place. So it's more of a following my feelings has been more of the tool that I've used rather than something tactical like running more, even though I tried to do that too.
Yeah. We've seen this a lot in the clients that we worked with and everywhere that I've been, even in leadership in the military when I was in there, that and I can relate to you in only being intellectual in things, is that the mind, from what I've learned and looked at now, I understand that the mind is more than just in your head and what you think. The mind is also your gut and your heart. And, then now worked out that we've got brains, or brain cells in these areas, in your heart and in your gut. And I think that if we're not connected, all three of those, and using those as the guidance, as the guidance and ultimately decision-making tool, then you're missing out on two-thirds of it. And we often see that often comes out with people, often missing the body part, because the body part is hugely important when it comes to making decisions. Like, how do you feel, as you described before? How do you feel? You make a decision and it can be logically all right, but how do you feel about it?
Yeah.
If you've got 2/3 of you pulling the wrong way and only 1/3 pulling, the head pulling one way and the heart and gut pulling the other way, you're going to
end up like me in 2016. Felt very uncomfortable.
Okay, so now going through the last 3 years of turbulent times and now connecting with more of your navigational tools, what has that given you today now? I mean, I'm just reading a little bit about what you're doing with Grameen and the impact that you're making, and your pull to social enterprises and to social impact. So what is it that is now becoming or coming out of that?
Well, I guess the three things that I was afraid of before I made those choices was that, one, I'd never make the kind of money I did before. Two, I would lose all my friends. I wouldn't have belonging because I was stepping outside of a traditional, conventional path. And then three, I thought that I would lose my identity because I didn't have status and the title. And what happened on the other side of those fears when I made the choices was that it was the actual opposite. One, I found out that I could, as an entrepreneur, make a hell of a lot more money than I could when I was salaried. Two, I found out that the more I connected authentically with who I was and what I wanted to contribute to the world without being afraid of judgment, that I found even more belonging. And three, I found that in the space of that particular belonging, I couldn't lose my identity. It's unshakable because I'm actually who I am rather than some image or some title that I'm projecting. And why that is also relevant for the work that I'm doing with Grameen Australia is I used to, in funds management and in corporate law, in mergers and acquisitions, I used to see a lot of shareholder primacy and profit coming above and beyond any other type of value. And that didn't sit well with me. I always felt like there had to be a way you could marry contributing to the broader ecosystem whilst making money at the same time. And I didn't know that that was a type of business that you could have. Grameen Australia is actually the conduit for this ideal of social business, which is a business designed that has to be financially viable and make a profit. But its North Star is to actually solve a human problem, whether it's financial exclusion, malnutrition, disability. It's designed to solve a problem, not through charity or handout, but by creating a business structure around it that makes a profit, that gets hosed back and recycled into the business and doesn't go into enriching shareholders only. And so to me, that was a phenomenal thing to learn, especially because the man who created this concept is a man called Professor Muhammad Yunus, who started Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. And in 2006, him and Grameen Bank jointly won the Nobel Peace Prize for their work deploying something called microfinance to the entire country, especially low-income women, to train them as micro-entrepreneurs so that they could lift their entire families out of poverty. And he started with like $27 across 42 women, and it's now $27 billion across 10 women, and into developed countries like America and Australia. And so the impact that I think being involved in an ideal like that and advancing it in a developed country like Australia is we can really show the power of business to make long-term permanent humanitarian change. I think it's so easy to see them as silos, like humanitarians and business people are opposite sides of the spectrum. But when you combine the two tools, the heart and the desire of the humanitarian with the structure, the efficiency and the resources of the business person, you can have a really powerful organizing mechanism to transform an entire system and touch people of all classes and all jurisdictions. And that's what gets me really excited about the model.
Oh, that's totally getting me excited as well, because what I'm finding is that exactly what you just said, like there's a lot of impact that we can do to third world countries, but there's a lot of impact that we can do in the countries that we live in right now.
Yeah, 100%. We'll see in Australia, the interesting thing is we're this super prosperous country, maybe one of the most prosperous civilizations of all time. And yet our great secret is that we've got so many pockets of disadvantage that remain unsolved. And primarily because the two ways of solving it, charity and government, have got their limitations. And there's absolutely a place for charity and government, but they're incomplete. If you had a tool where, unlike charity, it wasn't constantly looking for donor funding, it was self-sustaining, and unlike government, which is siloed and process-oriented, it was much more of a systems approach and gave rise to fresh creative thinking, like social business, then you might actually have a shot at solving some social problems in a long-lasting, viable way. And so the goal of Grameen Australia very much is to embed social business as part of the Australian fabric of solving social problems as much as charity and government are. And if you can do that across all dimensions in the social sector, corporates, governments, with mums and dads, with traditional philanthropists, with universities, then you'd have a very different definition of prosperity than we do now, where there are less haves and have nots.
Do you think in the system too, Kat, and I know we were talking about this just prior to coming onto the podcast, is that it's not just the money that's the issue; it's people's relationship to money. That is an issue. That is whether it's in a business setting or in a charity setting or just in people's personal lives. What their relationship is with money can make them do all kind of wigged out things. So, like I often looked at these things where people talk about, hey, we want to make this, big change, a big impact. And I think what often doesn't get talked about is how does the individual actually relate to them? What does it mean to them? Because it can cause you to have sleepless nights. It's a strong energy. So, within Grameen and within how you're working, how do you guys address that as an issue, or is it something that comes up?
Well, there's actually 2 points I really want to make about that: people's relationship with business and people's relationship with money. First one is with business, and the kind of business that we have is actually a signal of our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with the human spirit. Businesses that are only profit maximizing, which is our conventional view of business, very much assumes that the human spirit is only selfish, that we only want to have self-interest. The best interest of the shareholder is the self-interest of the shareholder, which is their profit. That's an incomplete view of the human spirit, because humans, yes, we're selfish, but we're also selfless. You don't often hear about a business tool that helps people to share the selfless, generous, altruistic side of themselves. Business, it's just an organizing mechanism to achieve concrete goals. And there are many concrete goals you can achieve. Profit maximization can be one, but solving a human problem can be another. Business is simply a vehicle of the soul, right? A vehicle for self-actualization. And so if you think about social business, means related to business is that we actually have an optimistic view of the human spirit. We believe that humans want to contribute. They are generous and they are altruistic and they want to help each other. Making money, Eunice often talks about making money is happiness. Making other people happy is super happiness. It actually makes you really happy to give back. That's part of our nature. And so our relationship with business is that a social business can help you to make money as well as solve a human problem. And that's a very, very exciting, well-rounded proposal for the human spirit. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is how we relate to money, which is one of the resources that gets flown out and through business, recycled through business. And, money is a really touchy subject in our society. If you have too much of it or too little of it, you can feel all sorts of things. You can feel shame for having too much and having too little. You can feel greed. You can feel guilt because you don't have enough or you've got too much. There's all sorts of feelings that come with that. And it's, I think, really important for us to understand our own relationship with money and to talk about it more and more. Because what happens when you have feelings like shame in your body, and money is just one way that you can feel that, is it can actually reduce your immune system. The more shame you feel, and this applies not just to money but in other facets of your life, you can actually deplete your immune system, become more constricted and get sicker. And so it's useful to be aware of that feeling when it's in your body. And it's also useful to know that other feelings can help you to boost your immune system. And I heard a woman, a psychologist from New York called Patricia Swabada, talk about the relationship between money and shame and the immunity at a private wealth network event. And what resonated with me was her antidote to this. And I thought that she would say, like, love or gratitude was the way that you would amplify your immune system and boost it. But what she said surprised me, because she said, actually, the feeling of awe, that feeling when you're looking at the night sky or the majesty of the ocean or a beautiful baby or breathing in the sun, that feeling of awe can actually boost your immune system and help to protect you from the shocks of day-to-day life. So I think if you have a more healthy relationship with money and realize it's just a tool and how we use it can be for good or bad, then we can start to decouple those negative feelings with what is actually a really powerful force for good in the world.
Yeah. I felt really moved by what you just said, because I put a little note here saying going against abundance is like going against human nature. We're kind of like meant to have enough and plentiful and not have to feel like you need or want more or shouldn't have as much as you do. And when you say about the awe and wonder, I love that, because it's kind of like coming back to the childlike innocence again. Yes. I look at my two children and they teach me how to adult.
100%.
Taking me back to that human spirit of awe and wonder. So that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing.
We've had a joke, long running joke. I guess it's not really a joke, but about the breathing and about the sunlight and about these things that we just mentioned and being in awe. The interesting thing is when you filled up by oxygen and by energy, and you get this from the sun, you get it from grounding your feet on the earth, you get it from breathing. When you feel filled up cellularly, then there's less feelings of lack that come in. And so, I've often noticed that in people that when their energy's low, all the lack mentality comes in.
Yes.
And so we do have I believe we have an epidemic of our leaders. In this country and around the world, that with them not really knowing, but when their energy is getting low, it's getting robbed by either poor habits or things that they don't know about, then you're actually by default going to end up in more of a lack mentality. Absolutely. Which makes it harder for you to be involved in things like, if you are in social enterprise or humanitarian, you're going to get depleted, and then you're going to start feeling the resentment and the things that you don't want to be feeling in the position that you're in, and you feel embarrassed and ashamed that you're in a position where you're doing something like this, but you just don't have the energy for it.
Absolutely.
So these are the loops that we see, and we've often seen that when people do bring in these fundamental practices like the breathing, like the getting out in the sun and getting energized as a leader, then all these other things that were seemingly like, oh, why do I feel this way? They just start to not be there anymore when the energy comes up. So yeah, I really, when you were saying some of those things, I can see how people can get caught in those loops of low energy.
Well, I myself, I notice when I've got low energy, I feel a lot of fear. And when you talk about those feelings of abundance, I feel like personally, as somebody who's gone from a very senior corporate salary in a 2-income family, a very comfortable life, moving to where I'm at now, it's a very different financial and relationship status. And that at times made me feel like I was moving into lack. But what I've noticed, and I'm not for a second saying that I am perfect at, replenishing my energy. I don't think any of us are, but I've noticed that I really get now what it means that financial security is a mindset, because I have less money and less security in terms of another person to support me than I did before. But there's a real feeling of self-security when I think you're doing something that you know is from the heart. Whether it fails or not is almost immaterial, but the sense of security that comes with being authentic and not having to seek that external approval is almost a proxy for the financial security, what financial security is. And so you can actually survive on quite a lot less, in fact, thrive and do really well. And that was something that I hadn't understood before. I thought I'd be powerless if I had less than X, but actually powerless because I'm not acting in accordance with my nature.
I love that. I was actually going to ask you how your energy was 3 years ago and how it is now. You just answered that question.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say, one, you cannot live on purpose alone. You definitely need sleep and you definitely need food and exercise. But I think my relationship with personal energy has flipped very much. I used to think that I had to put myself last and work first. It was like 80% work, 20% everything else, and then 0.5%. And I've flipped that triangle on its head now. And I'm, more and more really seeing the benefits of calling out and saying, to my board, we've gone through a massive transition and, my team, a massive transition. I'm going to need some mental health time because the next phase is like really big. So I need to recharge and replenish. And this is something that I'm, really want to ingrain into our culture. Like, you don't have to pretend that you're okay. We're all human. But if we can be real about that and be real about what our limitations are, I can help you and you can help me as a team when we're depleted, so that we're not running through brick walls when we're running on fumes, best work when we're in a high performance state. And that means actually being honest about when you're feeling depleted and when you're not, because that's just a much more real way of connecting and accelerating and having velocity in our work.
I love that you bring that up, Kat, about, like being honest and open about your energy levels. Angie and I have been sort of like down in the dungeon creating what we're creating, and what we've come up with is this concept of a battery and being able to have a metric for people to get a visualization of where their battery level's at for their energy. So if you know that you've dropped below a certain level because your habits have gotten, because we all know, like I like what you said before, and I totally agree with you. And this is something I think for me personally, I've got very high standards for myself. It just comes from because I've learned to love discipline and love and be devoted to certain things, because I know that fills me up. And so often when we talk to people, people are like, oh, it's all right for you. You're very disciplined and you can do these things. And I say to them, look, everybody falls off the wagon. It doesn't matter who you are. Even the most disciplined guru master in the world falls off. And it's having the energy to put yourself back on. It's like zigging when you're zagging. Like we often talk about this with a lot of clients. We say to them, it doesn't matter that you fell off. You've just got to have the energy to get back on, because if you don't, you're just going to, then you go off further and you go off further. So, we've looked at how do we develop something where someone can go, oh, well, okay, my habits are skewing off here, or, I'm starting to drink a lot more coffee than I was, or I'm not getting out to the sun, or I'm not breathing. And that'll give you an indication of where your battery is going to start heading. So yeah, it's good. I like hearing that.
And also I feel like it actually takes a lot of courage to admit that you're feeling tired. I used to say, well, I'm a strong leader and I need to have a particular facade so people can have confidence in me. And it's like, well, actually people have confidence in you when you're honest and you've got credibility. And you can't even be credible with yourself then how are you going to be credible with other people? And I don't, I used to feel very ashamed about being tired because I thought, I'd rejected that facet of my humanity. But I think being really honest about it, one, it makes you less tired because you have less energy because you're lying to people less and you can actually get support. And two, then you kind of create an environment where it's like, well, how do we adjust for that rather than feeling like you're getting rejected for it or you're getting judged for it. I think that's one of the biggest, most toxic, untalked about wellness problems in corporate life is how people have to just pretend that they're okay when they're not okay. And our companies, ASX-listed companies, are being run like this.
Yeah. And look, I what you just said is a keystone, and I think that people need to listen to what you just said. It's what you just said, and what I heard was when you are able to be vulnerable and tell people that you're tired and that you're human, that is far stronger a leadership quality than anything else, because people want to help you. Your colleagues, your co-workers, everyone wants to support you. And I think that when you put your hand up and, let's talk about mental health issues for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Because people, again, that was the thing. People would never say, I feel depressed or I feel anxious. Now it's fatigue. People feel even more embarrassed about saying that they feel fatigued because it's not depression or it's not anxiety or it's not some serious, what we would call a serious mental health issue. But what it is really is it. I mean, fatigue is the gateway where you go on the slippery slope of wherever you're predisposed to go down, whether it's going to be depression or it's going to be anxiety. So I think it's so important what you said about putting your hand up and creating that culture where you as the leader put your hand up and say, hey, you know what? I've been flying at the top of the V for a while. I'm going to have to drop back and someone else can take the lead. I always remembered as a one of my leadership tools was know when to lead, know when to follow, and know when to get out of the way.
100%. Absolutely.
Let someone else come in and take the position for a while, so you can drop back to the back of the pack, have a bit of a rest, and then eventually you'll make your way back up to the top again. To help out. So,
well, it depends on what your North Star for your company is. Is it actually achieve a joint goal, or is it to look good? If you're there to achieve a goal and you're not achieving the goal because you're tired, then you need to adjust the system for that phenomena and reorganize it, right? But if you're there to look good, you might not get the best outcomes for the company, but at least you'll preserve your ego and your pace, right? So
zero-sum game.
And it's a really hard thing to kind of go, well, actually, I need to sacrifice my ego and how it might look to others because we've got a broader goal to, aspire to.
Yeah.
And so tell us, we've been watching on social media and you have been all over the place. Tell us a little.
Geographically.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Kat. I did mean
other one as well.
Yeah, I meant getting out there and being busy. And so tell us a little bit about what from taking all these plane trips everywhere and what is the thing that kind of if you had to sum it up into 3 habits that keep you energized as a leader and keep you traveling around to all these places, presenting, probably taking questions, probably doing critical thinking on the spot about, because I know as a leader and in what I do, I'm constantly questioning myself, and that takes a huge amount of energy. When I'm about to present, you're thinking about the judgment. What are people going to say? Do they think my ideas are stupid? I'm just telling you all the things that go through my head, right? I'm sure I'm the only person, right? So what would you put it down to? Just give us an idea as an energized leader. What are 3 things that you do to keep yourself on your game for when you're in these situations of presenting and talking to people?
So I think there's the 3 tactical things, and for me, the tactical things would be meditating, journaling, and trying to get to sleep. I would say exercise, but I think if it was a choice between sleep and exercise, for me, sleep is more important.
I'm glad you said that. I was about to tell you then.
I think the habit is, the biggest habit that I've started to change is kind of my self-talk around 2 things. One, actually being honest and self-aware with how I'm feeling and being brave enough to call that out. So if it's feeling doubt, actually admit that you're feeling doubt. If it's feeling nerves, actually admit that it's feeling nerves, and then being like, okay, so I don't have to deny that that's happening. What next? And then 2, the other habit is actually that I've learned the more that I'm open about my human feelings, the more belonging I feel. And so I try to actually connect on that level with people as much as I can every day. And that's something that my partner's been really useful and helpful at getting me to practice, is like, actually be open to saying that you're overwhelmed. Actually ask for help. Like, we like it when you talk about how vulnerable you are, because it makes you more relatable, you know? Like, it's the total opposite. I used to think if I talked about these things that I would be distancing myself from my friends because they think I'm weak, but it's the actual opposite. You start to connect more and more, and there's no substitute to that feeling of belonging. When people know that you're just a flawed human but love and accept you anyway, it gives you a lot of confidence.
Well,
Yes.
one interesting thing that I found out about looking at longevity is that one of the massive predictors of longevity that people totally miss is community, is being around and belonging and being with people is actually, I wouldn't say it's the strongest, but it's up there with the biggest predictor of longevity in your life is
Definitely
belonging. Yeah.
Yeah, and belonging only happens, I realize belonging only happens when I share, because people don't understand me, or it's like because I've withheld parts of myself because I keep them to myself because I'm worried I'll look bad.
Yeah.
The more you share those, the more you actually develop, greater credibility, greater confidence, and a greater sense of security in self. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, by the way, because I'm still do get scared of those parts of myself I can't quite understand. But it's just like, every day kind of trying to practice being a real person rather than this of a leader.
Which I think is the rise of new leaders, to be honest with you. The people that we have come into touch with, like to work with or to interview, such as yourself, what I'm finding is that these new leaders are starting to emerge, and the new leaders are having the qualities that you're just saying, the strength and vulnerability, the ability to be honest about their own personal energy and creating that connection with people, because people see, like, I'm noticing this. I know it's probably an interesting analogy, but I would probably say it's pretty close, about how I am with my children. If I try to be perfect, my children are going to have a really poor outlook on what leadership should be like.
By the way, that word I was almost thinking about banning the word perfect off our podcast. So you know what's interesting, Kat, is like what I like to say to people about perfectionism is the only thing that you should be a perfectionist about is taking care of yourself.
Oh, fully.
That got me in the gut when he said that.
That's the only thing, and I love to say that to women, because as you pointed out before, in my experience with women leaders and being at home with 3 women, is that they put themselves at the bottom of the totem pole. And it was interesting what you said about the 20% you only had for yourself and the 80% that you had for work. That was that description to me, was you putting, women do that a lot, especially women leaders. They put themselves, and do you know I think the amazing thing about that is that they are the foundation. Like the females, the feminine strength and the nurturing and the that is the foundation. Like the male energy is like that real action,
resilience,
the real drive potential, but it cannot exist unless it has that container, that foundation to create in or to co-create in. I know I'm getting off a little bit off down the rabbit hole here, but it's important. I think it's important for women to know that they don't have to relegate themselves to the bottom of the totem pole. But I think that what they must understand is that everybody is going to look to them for stability. For when the shit hits the fan. That's where you look. I mean, I look to her when the shit hits the fan and go, what do we do?
I do too.
What do we do? And while I can keep
what did you say now?
well, I can keep the drive. I can keep the drive energy on, and it's important to keep a cool head. It takes 2, and I think that a lot of women, I would implore them to acknowledge themselves about being the foundation and being the rock. And of course they need things, but don't always look at yourself as being on the bottom, when it means to be the foundation is also to be the very base part of where everything starts. So
off the back of that rant, how are you finding flipping the triangle on its head, so to speak? How are you finding how the environment is taking it?
Lots of guilt to start with, because they had to re-engineer that mindset that if I took any time to sleep, that I was weak or that I wasn't dedicated enough to work, and it was a lot of guilt. And actually I realized that overcoming the guilt took a lot of courage. And so that's what, helped me feel a little bit better about myself, that I was being brave. Being brave to go to sleep. Can you believe this? This is how dominant mindset is. And,
yes.
Give yourself permission to rest. And those days when I just feel like I don't have the energy to do the 400,000 things, I need to recuperate, and then finding that it actually took less time to do it once I rested. Those little adjustments, God, it's been a really long road to give myself permission to do that, and I'm not there yet. How I feel now is I actually feel like it's a signal of maturity and a signal of confidence that I am becoming more honest about what I need. Because then your environment is real. People don't have to second guess. Is she going to fall off the, perch because she's okay, but she's not okay? It's a much more real environment, and the connections that I'm making with my friends and my team and my board are real. And by the way, the judgment I thought would be leveled at me because I was honest about how fragile I was at certain times hasn't come. It's people I understand. Yes. Well, what can we put in place to ensure that we're fine? You're like, okay. So it turns out if I ask for help, I actually get help from you.
Yeah.
I want to jump in here. I want to just ask you something, Kat, because I could see that when you were talking about not sleeping, I saw your energy rise. It's still it's still a thing that and I think that the reason I point this out is because I think that this being Australian and women leaders listening to this, being Australian, it's easy for you to just swat it aside and have a laugh about it and say, "Oh yeah, I was brave about not sleeping." But and if you want to know about sleep, and I know you've spoken to us about it, and it's something you can't hack. It's so important. They call it beauty sleep, right, for a reason. Right? Okay, ladies, listen up. It's so important. But when your energy raised around that, I think that that's a common thing that not only women leaders have, but all leaders have, is that they wear it as a badge of honor. That whole I can go on 5 hours sleep and I'm getting all this stuff. It's it's almost in our Australian culture, it's like this little badge of honor. People scoff at it and laugh and kind of make a joke. But I think deep down, it's still a really
concrete.
It is. It's a core thing, And so I want to make sure that we do look at that. I know you're talking about asking for help from team and it becoming important. But I think I wanted to highlight it because I want people to get that's what this is about. That's why we're sitting here having this conversation, is because it's small things like this, guilt around sleep and guilt around resting, especially with women, that is destroying people's energy.
Well, it's destroying societies, really.
Yeah. And Ariana Huffington, I heard her say one time in one of her quotes, she's like, the real secret, ladies, is sleep your way to the top. And it doesn't mean sleep your way with someone else. It's go to sleep.
Yes. Go to sleep. There's a book on that for kids.
Yes, exactly. So I think that I really admire you. I love the fact that you've come onto this podcast to share this, because I think that you are one of the forefront leading women making waves and changes in the cultural space. And it's not easy. It's not an easy feat to do. I'll tell you that. I'm watching how it's going for people in different leaders that we work with.
We're in support.
Totally.
Solidarity, brother.
And to go back to, for me, I use the reference of motherhood because that's what I know most. And I reference everything. I mean, running a business to being a mom, I mean, running a business is like running children. I mean, it
This is
is.
a motherhood. It's a thing.
Our
It
kids,
is
someone asked our kids if we were going to have extra children, and the kids go, "Oh, no, mummy and daddy have got a third child. It's a business."
Yeah, they know.
Oh, so true. But I think it's really important, Angie, as well, when you talk about motherhood. That's another pillar of the that is the tantamount to business.
Yeah.
And like the way that is valued in society and the way that women have to navigate that part of their lives. Me going on to, I've just turned 36, and that's something that's ever present in my mind as I, have a career as well as have aspirations to be a mother. I think, that's a conversation we should not skirt over as well. Maybe not now, but I just that because it's so critical. Like, how are you going to have a well-rounded society when you have this unspoken thing that women are also and men are going through when we understand our roles.
And to put like a little blanket around that, as far as like my top-down view of that, is when women know how to get into their own rhythms, when they know how their rhythms operate, they can get so much more done. And when I say rhythms, so we each have like the 4 rhythms. I mean, I've done a podcast on this with Shane around understanding your cycles. You got 4 rhythms in your cycles, and that women primarily experience. Men have it too, but I think women is just more in our face. And if you can learn to honor each of those rhythms when they come up, you can get so much more done even by doing less. Like, it's leveraging your own personal energy and the environment around you to therefore bring everybody together to do this. Because I know in ancient cultures, no women gave birth by themselves. It was always a team of people supporting them and praising them and bringing life out.
I think one of the huge things, and one of the absolute, I geek out on ancient cultures. Like I'm just banking and finance is one of them, and ancient cultures. I just
accident you're on our podcast.
Spend a lot of time. So and just we are missing so much shit by not looking at what some of those ancient cultures were doing, especially when it comes even around things like energy and even the energy in business, the energy in money, the energy in ourselves. Like, this stuff has been worked out. It's been worked out, and it's there. It's just that I think that, like, with everything that we've been talking about, with the busyness of status and life, and what people have lost, what is purpose to people? Like, I've often said to people, remove purpose from your job. Like, don't think that your purpose is what you're doing in your job, because you'll get confused. Purpose is about just you being the happiest, best version of yourself, regardless of whatever you're doing, and you can exist doing that. A lot of these ancient cultures have talked about this. Have talked about what it means and how. And so we're looking at why I bring this up with the women and the cycles is because most of this stuff that we've read and we've looked at, and I've looked at it first. I've come to Angie. I've gone, Angie, did you know? Like, have a look at this. This is the stuff that they were doing, like, way back, and that makes so much more sense, and it's so relevant to how we live today. And I just and so, like, we're doing a lot of stuff where we're drawing this stuff out and saying, look, this stuff's been going on. It's been written about on astrology cards or tarot cards. Like, you name it. The golden thread of wisdom is through these things, and I think it's up to us as the new leaders, and this is part of my passion, is bringing that back so that people can understand that it just takes a shitload of stress off you when you understand that you can live in with these natural cycles. Like, I've found at home, being with Angie here, working, we run a business together, but being in time with her cycles and being in the process of it makes it a shitload easier to be here.
Not at all. I mean, and with all of this, it's if you're a high performance junkie like we are, why not add more tools to the toolkit? Like, understand how you can get those little bits of performance by with your cycles, because you can get more done with less, right? And
scaling.
Yeah.
You can scale your energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you onto the podcast today, because I know that you are in the trenches right now.
Sorry to drop you in there, Kat.
And I think it's important that people get that the next wave of human leadership is that human spirit, like what you had mentioned before about the human spirit, and understanding that, and being able to align with your own personal human spirit. I mean, with where tech's going, the wave of human existence is going to become more and more and more popular. It's going to become a necessity as tech starts to get bigger and grow. And so that's why I love what you're doing in the space of looking at business and the energy of business, and looking at the energy of money, and your relationship to that. So to me that's very inspiring, and I think that we've only kind of like licked the flavor of the ice cream here with you. I think that we can go probably a little bit deeper and then into other podcasts.
I'm sure we will have. I would love to talk more about Grameen and the business model and how they do it, because as I said before, I'm a geek with finance and economics, and I've looked at a lot of models that where if we take out that assumption, as you said before, if we take out the assumption that people are just greedy and that they'll get lazy if they're not working all the time, and these sorts of things, I think are total fallacies. And there's others. So I would really I'd like to do another podcast and sort of talk about that.
Love talking about this, as you guys know.
but one thing that we did want to ask you in being an energized leader is what gets you up in the morning? Like, what juices you? Why do you do what you do?
To experience a quality of connection with others, and therefore experience a quality of connection with myself. I think why I get up and do what I do with social business is I've learned so much how I've disconnected from myself because I've bought into like a dominant systems narrative that said that money and material goods and status were, what it meant to be alive. And it took me a long time to decouple that and realize that my personal happiness and satisfaction and sense of fulfillment wasn't anchored on those signals. And there's two things I'd love to be able to do with my work. One, to help decouple those signals of success with happiness for people in the corporate world and help them to realize that they don't need those to be loved and be approved of and to be successful. And two, to offer those material necessities to people that otherwise wouldn't get access to it. So it's I feel like we are, we can demonize material possessions, but they actually offer a lot of support and help for people who do need them. But then up to a point, because once you valorize them in a healthy way, then you actually lose connection with the most important thing, and that's relationships and human belonging. Like literally no substitute for that. Everything I do, and every time I wake up in the day, I think, what's the quality of human connection I can have? It's just boiled down to that.
Wow,
that's awesome. Beautiful.
I want to say one thing, and you and I can chat about this because I'd love to have this conversation with you. In my search for what energy of money means and that sort of thing, I came across some interesting perspectives on, you were talking about material things, and one of the interesting things I read was that if you look at money, and the energy of money is similar to let's use I'm not affiliated with any religious belief, but let's use God, for example. They said that money is the energy of God because it can manifest and it can take things away.
Yep.
And so I think that take out of that what you will. You can go as deep into that as you want or as shallow as you want, but I think everyone's got to understand that it's here at the moment in its form, in whatever it is, and I think it's up to us to work out how we relate to that, and then how it affects the world that we live in, and how can we improve that system so that everybody can function with it and still feel happy, not feel huge amounts of dread or guilt or shame around these sorts of things. I think that's something that's been swimming around my head a lot.
Well, very relevantly to that, because I do work in the philanthropy space, and on every day I could be talking to a Cambodian scavenger or a Hong Kong billionaire. And so money separates them because of their context and the content of their lives, but it also connects them because what I notice is they're the same. Their vulnerability is the same. The jokes they laugh at are the same. What they want out of life is the same. Their quality of human spirit is absolutely identical. And that's a provocative statement, because billionaires with scavengers, they're the same. That's not something people want to hear, but that's really the truth of it. And what I'm seeing more and more, it's just money is just a tool for people to reflect their own humanity through that and express themselves through that and have a relationship with that, as a way of understanding what's going on in their lives.
I just got the chills when you said that.
That's awesome.
And I think that's where it's also very relevant what you said about bringing awe and wonder to money as well, and the energy of the community around it. So that is beautiful.
Well, we're gonna wrap this up.
Thank you for
because
sharing
this is gone.
I know,
this is probably gone one of the longest longest ones we've had. But Kat, we've really enjoyed. No, do not apologize.
It only goes long when we get into a conversation.
Yeah, we're really getting
It's more of a compliment than anything. So thank you for taking the time today to share yourself.
Energized leader, like,
I know.
you made my month.
Beautiful. Well, you would be like the pinup girl for the Energized Leader.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys so much.